The alarm screamed through the Galactic Council monitoring station. Red lights flashed across every screen in the command center. Ambassador Minho jumped from his seat, his 4 eyes wide with shock. Something impossible had just happened. Report, he shouted at the nearest technician. The technician's hands shook as she worked her console. Ambassador, we have a vessel inside the void shroud. It just appeared on our sensors. Minho's blood ran cold. In 300 years, nothing had ever survived entry into the void shroud. The restricted zone was a death trap wrapped in spatial anomalies that tore ships apart at the atomic level. Hundreds of vessels had tried to enter. None had succeeded. Most simply vanished. A few sent back brief screams before going silent forever. That's impossible, Minho said. Check your instruments. Run a full diagnostic. Already done, sir. 3 times. The readings are accurate. The technician brought up the main display. A small ship sat in the center of the void shroud, surrounded by swirling red markers that indicated the deadly anomalies. The vessel is intact and shows active power signatures. Minho stared at the screen. His mind raced through possibilities. A weapon? A trap? Some new technology from a hostile species? But there was something else that caught his attention. The ship's design was unfamiliar. He had studied every known species vessel configurations during his training. This one matched none of them. Identify the ship, he ordered. The technician worked quickly, cross-referencing with all known databases. Sir, I'm getting a match. The vessel is registered to a species called humans. They're new to this sector. First contact was made only 2 years ago. Humans? Minho had heard of them. A young species from a small blue planet they called Earth. They had barely developed faster than light travel. Their ships were primitive compared to Council standards. And now one of their vessels sat in the most dangerous zone in the galaxy. How did they get in there? Minho asked. Unknown, sir. We detected no entry trajectory. No warp signature. No spatial distortion. The ship simply appeared on sensors as if it had always been there. That made no sense. Ships didn't just appear. They traveled through space, leaving traces that sensors could detect. But the data was clear. One moment the void shroud had been empty. The next moment a human ship was inside it. Minho activated his communication link to the Council headquarters. This is Ambassador Minho at Monitoring Station 7. We have a situation. Emergency Protocol Alpha 9. Within minutes, the communication channel filled with voices. Council members from across the galaxy demanded answers. The High Arbiter's face appeared on the main screen. His reptilian features showed concern. Explain, Ambassador, the High Arbiter said. Minho provided the details. As he spoke, he watched the other council members' reactions. Some looked frightened. Others looked angry. A few looked calculating, as if they were already planning how to use this situation to their advantage. The humans must be destroyed, Admiral Jormak said. His species valued military strength above all else. They have penetrated our most secure, restricted zone. This is clearly an act of aggression. We don't know that, Minho argued. They might not even know where they are. Ignorance is not an excuse, was the Admiral shot back. They pose a threat. Inside the human ship, Captain G1 studied her navigation display with growing confusion. The star charts didn't match their current position. According to the instruments, they should be in neutral space, following a peaceful exploration route. But something felt wrong. Hyun, check the drive system, she said to her chief engineer. Hyun sat at his console, running diagnostics. He was young for a chief engineer, barely 30 years old, but brilliant. He had designed the experimental fold drive that powered the Steadfast. The drive was supposed to create temporary folds in space, allowing faster travel than conventional warp drives. Captain, the drive is functioning normally, Hyun reported, but I'm seeing some strange readings in the local space around us. Strange how? Like the space itself is wrong. The quantum measurements don't make sense. It's as if reality is thinner here. Lieutenant Yunji looked up from her communication station. Captain, I'm detecting multiple vessels outside our position. They're not approaching, but they're definitely watching us. I can't establish communication through normal channels. There's too much interference. Jiwan stood and walked to the main view screen. She activated the external cameras. What she saw made her stomach drop. Space around the Steadfast looked sick. It twisted and bent in ways that hurt to watch. Colors that shouldn't exist swirled in impossible patterns. And beyond that nightmare, she could see the distant lights of other ships. Where are we? She whispered. Dr. Sunho, the ship's xenobiologist and cultural expert, worked at his station. Captain, I managed to boost our sensors. We're surrounded by a phenomenon the database identifies as the Void Shroud. It's a Galactic Council restricted zone. No ships are allowed to enter. Why not? Because nothing survives entry. According to the records, this zone has a 100% fatality rate. The bridge went silent. Every crew member turned to look at Sunho, then at the twisted space on the view screen, then at each other. But we're alive, Jiwan said slowly. Yes, Captain, we are. And according to physics, that should be impossible. Back at the monitoring station, Minho watched as the council continued to debate. Some members wanted immediate action. Others urged caution. The High Arbiter tried to maintain order, but voices kept rising. We should send a probe, one council member suggested. Gather more information before deciding. We've sent probes before, another replied. They all failed. Then we send a crewed vessel. Who would volunteer for a suicide mission? Minho made a decision. I will, he said, his voice cutting through the argument. Everyone fell silent. I will approach the perimeter. I won't enter, but I'll position my fleet close enough to attempt communication. The High Arbiter nodded slowly. Permission granted. But Ambassador, you are not to cross the boundary under any circumstances. We cannot lose you. Understood. Minho ordered his fleet to move toward the Void Shroud's edge. As they approached, the sensors showed the horrific nature of the boundary. Space itself seemed to break down at the perimeter. The barrier between normal space and the Void Shroud was like looking at a wound in reality. Prepare a communication drone, Minho ordered. Load it with standard first contact protocols. We need to warn the humans about their situation. The drone launched. Minho and his crew watched as it flew toward the boundary. For a moment it seemed like it might succeed. Then it touched the edge of the Void Shroud. The drone didn't explode. It didn't crash. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next moment there was nothing. Not debris, not energy, just empty space where the drone had been. By the ancestors, Minho breathed. On the steadfast, alarm suddenly blared. Hyun shouted from his station. Captain, power drain detected. Life support is failing. It's not a malfunction. Something is draining energy from our systems. Ji-won gripped her command chair. How long do we have? At this rate? 72 hours. Maybe less. Ji-won looked at her crew. They were trapped in a place that killed everything. Their ship was slowly dying. And somewhere outside, unknown aliens were watching, trying to decide their fate. All hands, she said, her voice steady despite the fear. This is the captain. We're in a difficult situation, but we're alive, and that means we have a chance. We're going to find a way out of this. Start working on solutions. We're not giving up. The crew responded with determination. They were human. They were explorers, and they would not die quietly in the dark. Engineer Hyun hadn't slept in 20 hours. His eyes were red and his hands trembled as he pulled up another set of drive logs. Around him, the engine room hummed with dying power. Every hour, the ship's energy levels dropped lower. Every hour, they came closer to complete system failure. There has to be something, he muttered, scrolling through data streams. There has to be a reason we survived. The fold drive was his creation. He had spent 5 years developing the theory, another 3 building the prototype. The drive was supposed to be simple. It folded space, bringing 2 distant points together briefly, allowing the ship to cross vast distances quickly. But these logs showed something different, something impossible. The drive hadn't folded space. It had connected 2 points in reality that existed in different states of being. For a fraction of a second, the Steadfast had been in 2 places at once. Then the connection collapsed and they materialized here inside the Void Shroud. Captain, Hyun said into his communicator, I need to show you something. Minutes later, Captain Ji-won stood in the engine room studying the data on Hyun's screen. Lieutenant Yoonji had come with her. Both women looked exhausted. None of the crew had rested since they discovered their situation. Explain it to me in simple terms, Ji-won said. Hyun took a deep breath. The fold drive worked differently than I planned. Instead of folding space normally, it created a connection between 2 impossible points. We didn't travel through space. We jumped between realities. And that put us here? Yes, but here's what's strange, Captain. The Void Shroud shouldn't allow matter to exist. The spatial anomalies should tear apart anything with mass. But we're still here. We're still alive. Why? I think it's us, the crew. Our presence is somehow keeping the ship stable. Ji-won frowned. That doesn't make sense. We're just people. I know. But the data supports it. When crew members move to different sections of the ship, the power drain in those sections slows down. When sections are empty, they fail faster. It's like our consciousness is anchoring the ship to reality. Yoonji spoke up from where she'd been listening. I managed to establish communication with the aliens outside. They call themselves the Galactic Council. I've been exchanging messages with an ambassador named Minho. What did he say? Jiwon asked. He's scared, Captain. They all are. He told me that 587 ships have tried to enter this zone over the past 3 centuries. None survived. Most vanished instantly. Some sent distress calls, but those stopped after a few seconds. We're the first to survive more than a minute. Did you tell him about Hyun's theory? Yes. He's sharing it with their scientists now. On Ambassador Minho's command ship, the Council's chief scientist studied the human data. Scientist Thalrix was a being of pure logic. Her species communicated through bioluminescent patterns on their bodies. Right now, her lights flickered with confusion and excitement. This is fascinating, she said, her words translated by computer. The humans claim their minds are holding their ship together. It sounds like superstition, but their data is solid. Minho stood beside her, watching the analysis. Is it possible? I don't know. We've never encountered anything like this. Consciousness affecting physical reality? It contradicts everything we understand about physics. But the humans are alive. Yes, that also contradicts everything we understand about the Void Shroud. The High Arbiter's face appeared on the communication screen. Report, Ambassador. The humans have a theory, High Arbiter. They believe their crew's consciousness is keeping their ship stable in the Void Shroud. Scientist Thalrix is analyzing the data now. Consciousness? The High Arbiter's voice carried skepticism. That sounds like mysticism, not science. Perhaps, Minho agreed. But they're alive when they should be dead? We must consider every possibility. Admiral Jormak interrupted. This is a waste of time. The humans are a threat. Their ship has breached our most secure zone. They possess technology we don't understand. We should destroy them before they escape and share that technology with hostile species. They're dying, Admiral, Minho said sharply. Their life support is failing. They have less than 3 days left. What threat can dying explorers pose? Every threat if we allow them to live long enough to escape. Dr. Sunho worked in the Steadfast small laboratory. He had been studying the Council's historical records, which Yoonji had received during their communications. The records painted a grim picture. 300 years ago, the Void Shroud appeared suddenly. One day, that region of space was normal. The next day, it had transformed into a death zone. The Council immediately declared it restricted. Over the centuries, various species had tried to study it. Scientists sent probes. They all failed. Military commanders sent armed vessels. Those failed too. Even AI-controlled ships with no living crew vanished without trace. But the humans had survived. Why, Sunho reviewed the crew manifest. The Steadfast carried 32 people. Engineers, scientists, pilots, medical staff. All human. All conscious, thinking beings. According to Hyun's theory, those 32 minds were keeping the ship anchored in reality. Sunho called the captain. I have an idea. It's experimental and possibly dangerous. Everything about our situation is dangerous, Doctor, Jiwon replied. What's your idea? We should try to move. If our consciousness keeps us stable, maybe we can move through the Void Shroud. Maybe we can navigate to the edge. Hyun said the power drain increases when we use systems. Moving would require engine power. True, but staying here guarantees death. Movement might kill us faster or it might save us. Jiwon considered this. She looked around the bridge at her crew. They were frightened but determined. They trusted her to make the right choice. We'll try, she decided. But first I want to talk to this Ambassador Minho. Yoonji, can you establish a direct communication link? I think so, Captain. The quantum particles I've been using for messages can carry audio now. Minutes later, Jiwon heard Minho's voice for the first time. It was strange. Filtered through alien vocal cords and translated by computer, but she could hear the concern in it. Captain Jiwon, Minho said, I wish we could meet under better circumstances. So do I, Ambassador. I need to ask you something important. If we manage to reach the edge of this zone, will your people let us through, or will they destroy us? There was a pause. Jiwon imagined Minho choosing his words carefully. I will do everything in my power to ensure your safety, he finally said. But I must be honest. The Council is divided. Some see you as a threat. They fear your technology. They fear what it means that you survived where everyone else died. We're not a threat. We're explorers who made a mistake. I believe you, Captain, but I am only one voice among thousands. Then help me understand something. Why is this zone so dangerous? What created it? We don't know. It appeared 300 years ago. Our best scientists have studied it for centuries. They have no answers. The void shroud simply exists and it kills everything that enters it. Until Ji-won made her decision. We're going to try to reach the edge. If we stay here, we die slowly. If we move, we might die quickly, but at least we tried. I understand. I will do what I can to help from out here. Thank you, Ambassador. Ji-won assembled her senior staff, Hyun, Yoonji, Sunho, and Commander Yuna, her second-in-command. Yuna was a former military officer who had joined the exploration service after years of combat duty. She brought tactical thinking to every situation. We move in 6 hours, Ji-won announced. Hyun, I need the engines at maximum efficiency. Yoonji, maintain constant communication with the Council. Sunho, monitor the crew's condition. Yuna, plot the safest course to the perimeter. Captain, Yuna said, studying the navigation charts. There is no safe course. Every direction is equally dangerous. Then pick the shortest one. As the crew prepared, Minho watched from his ship. Thalric stood beside him, her lights flickering with concern. They're going to die, she said quietly. Perhaps, Minho replied, but they're going to die trying to live. There's something admirable about that. You like them? I do. There's something different about humans. They face impossible situations with determination instead of despair. Maybe that's why they survived initial entry. Maybe their minds work differently than ours. Or maybe they're just lucky and their luck is running out. Minho watched the small human ship on his sensors. It hung in the twisted space of the void shroud, surrounded by death. In 6 hours, they would try to move. In 6 hours, the humans would either prove they were special, or they would become victim number 588. He hoped they were special. The galaxy needed more species who refused to give up. Ensign Daeho sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the fear in his chest. He was 24 years old, the youngest pilot in the exploration fleet. His superiors said he had exceptional spatial awareness, an instinct for navigation that computers couldn't match. Now he would need every bit of that skill. Engine power at 70%, Hyun reported from engineering. That's the best I can give you, Daeho. Any more and we risk complete failure. 70% is enough, Daeho replied. Though he wasn't sure if he believed it, Captain Ji-won stood behind his chair watching the view screen. The twisted space of the void shroud filled their view. It looked like reality was sick, like the universe itself had a wound that wouldn't heal. Proceed carefully, Ji-won ordered. At the first sign of increased power drain, stop immediately. Daeho engaged the engines. The Steadfast moved forward, pushing through the strange space. Every meter felt like pushing through thick mud. The ship's hull groaned with stress. Alarms started beeping as various systems strained under the pressure. Then something unexpected happened. The power drain slowed. Captain, Hyun's voice came through the intercom, filled with surprise. The movement is actually helping. The energy drain decreased by 15%. How is that possible? Ji-won asked. I think the movement is keeping us more connected to normal reality, like swimming instead of sinking. We're not fighting the void shroud. We're moving with it. Commander Yuna studied her tactical display. She had been a strategist in Earth's Defense Force before joining the Exploration Service. She was trained to see patterns, to understand how systems worked. Now she saw something that changed everything. Captain, look at this, Yuna said, bringing up her data on the main screen. I've been analyzing the spatial readings around us. The void shroud isn't random chaos. It has structure, patterns like it was designed. Designed? Ji-won moved closer to the display. You mean artificial? Possibly. Look at these energy signatures. They repeat every 47 seconds. That's too regular to be natural. Something created this zone. Dr. Sunho joined the discussion. If the void shroud is artificial, that means someone built it. The question is why? Why create a death zone in the middle of space? To protect something, Yuna said. Or to contain something. On Minho's command ship, scientist Thalrix was reaching the same conclusion. Her instruments had been monitoring the Steadfast's movement. The humans were doing something no other species had achieved. They were navigating inside the void shroud. Ambassador, you need to see this, she said, her lights pulsing with urgency. Minho looked at her data. The human ship was moving steadily toward the perimeter. More importantly, their life support had stabilized. They weren't dying anymore. They were adapting. How are they doing this? Minho asked. I believe Engineer Hyun's theory was correct. Human consciousness does interact with the void shroud differently, but there's more. Look at these readings. The shroud is responding to their presence. It's changing. Changing how? Becoming less chaotic, more structured, as if the humans are teaching it how to behave. The High Arbiter's face appeared on the communication screen. He looked tired. The council had been in session for 30 straight hours debating the human situation. Ambassador, we have a decision, the High Arbiter said. The council has voted. If the humans reach the perimeter, we will allow them to exit, but they must share all data about their drive system and their experience inside the void shroud. They'll agree to that, Minho said with relief. However, the High Arbiter continued, his voice heavy. Admiral Jormak has placed military vessels at the perimeter. If the humans show any signs of aggression, or if they attempt to flee without sharing data, his ships have orders to destroy them. Minho felt anger rise in his chest. They're not aggressive. They're frightened explorers trying to survive. Nevertheless, the Admiral has his orders. The Council cannot show weakness. Too many species are watching this situation. We must demonstrate strength. After the High Arbiter disconnected, Thalrix turned to Minho. Her lights showed sympathy. You disagree with the decision. I disagree with threatening innocent beings. The humans have done nothing wrong except survive. Now we treat them like criminals. The Council fears what it doesn't understand. That's not wisdom, but it is predictable. Minho made a choice that would change his life. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going to the perimeter, as close as possible. You can't cross the boundary. The High Arbiter forbade it. I know, but I can be there. I can show the humans that not all council members want them dead. On the Steadfast, Deho continued piloting through the impossible space. He had developed a technique. Instead of fighting against the strange currents of the void shroud, he moved with them. He anticipated changes in the spatial distortions and adjusted course before the ship hit them. You're good at this, Commander Yuna said, watching his work. It's like surfing, Deho replied. My father taught me on the beaches of Busan. You don't fight the waves. You ride them. You're surfing through broken space on a dying ship in a zone that has killed hundreds of vessels. Your father would be proud or terrified. Probably both. Hours passed. The Steadfast pushed deeper into the void shroud, following Yuna's plotted course toward the perimeter. The crew worked together with practiced efficiency. Engineers rerouted power. Scientists monitored the spatial readings. Medical staff kept everyone healthy and alert. Then Deho saw something that made him catch his breath. Captain, there's something ahead, structures, large ones. The view screen filled with an impossible sight. Massive structures floated in the twisted space, each one larger than any ship humans had ever built. They were ancient, their surfaces marked by eons of exposure to the void shroud's chaos. But they were intact. They had survived where everything else failed. What are they? Jiwan whispered. I don't know, Sunho said, working his console frantically. But they're old. Millions of years old. And they're definitely artificial. Yuna studied the structures with tactical analysis. They're positioned in a pattern, like a perimeter defense or a containment field. Containment for what? Yunji asked. No one had an answer. Specialist Nari, the ship's cryptolinguist, had been quiet during most of the crisis. She specialized in decoding alien languages and ancient texts. Now she spoke up for the first time in hours. Captain, I'd like permission to scan those structures. If they have any writing or symbols, I might be able to interpret them. Do it, Jiwan agreed. The Steadfast moved closer to the nearest structure. It was a tower of some kind, kilometers tall, made from a dark material that seemed to absorb light. As they approached, lights activated on its surface. The ancient system still had power. Nari's console lit up with data. I'm detecting symbols. Thousands of them. It's a language I've never seen before, but the mathematical foundations are similar to other ancient writings we've discovered. Can you translate it? Jiwan asked. Give me time. While Nari worked, Minho's shuttle approached the perimeter. He positioned himself as close to the boundary as safety allowed. Through his instruments, he could see the human ship near the ancient structures. He sent a message through the quantum link. Captain Jiwan, this is Ambassador Minho. I wanted you to know that some of us support you. You're not alone out here. Jiwan's voice came back, warm despite the strain. Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know. What have you found? Ancient structures. We think the Void Shroud was built by someone. A long time ago. We're trying to understand why. Minho felt a chill run through his body. The Void Shroud was artificial. The implications were staggering. Some ancient civilization had possessed the power to create a zone that killed everything that entered it. Why would anyone build such a thing? On the Steadfast, Nari suddenly stood up from her console. Her face was pale. Captain, I've translated some of the symbols. You need to hear this. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at her. The structure is a warning beacon, Nari said, her voice shaking. It says we are the progenitors. We were the first to walk among the stars. We built this prison not to keep others out, but to keep something in. We could not destroy it, so we contained it. To whoever reads this, turn back. Do not release what we have bound. Silence filled the bridge. The implications hit everyone at once. They weren't just in a death zone. They were in a prison, and something was trapped here with them. What did they imprison? Yuna asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, every alarm on the ship started screaming. The power drain that had stabilized suddenly increased exponentially. The lights flickered. The engines began to fail. Something's waking up. Yen shouted from engineering. The energy drain is off the charts. On Minho's shuttle, Thalrix's instruments went wild. Ambassador, massive energy signatures are forming inside the Void Shroud. Multiple locations. They're enormous. Minho watched in horror as new contacts appeared on his sensors. They weren't ships. They weren't anything he recognized. They were structures emerging from impossible angles, appearing in space that shouldn't exist. And they were all converging on the Steadfast. The structures emerged from angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. They appeared between moments as if they had always been there and were only now choosing to be seen. Each one pulsed with an energy that made the Steadfast's instruments scream in protest. Captain Jiwan gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered. Hyun, report. Power drain at 300% normal levels, the engineer shouted back. Life support will fail in 10 minutes. Maybe less. Can we move away from those things? Captain, they're not approaching us. We're not moving, but the distance between us and them is shrinking. Space itself is folding. Dr. Sunho stared at his readings with wide eyes. They're not ships. They're not structures. They're something else. Something that exists partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else. Specialist Nari was frantically translating more symbols from the ancient beacon. Her hands shook as she worked. The progenitors called them the Watchers. They were created as weapons during a war. But they evolved. They became something the progenitors couldn't control. What do they want? Jiwan asked. To observe. To understand. The progenitors said the Watchers feed on conscious thought. They study thinking beings by consuming their minds. The bridge went silent except for the wailing alarms. Every crew member understood what that meant. These things were drawn to consciousness. And the Steadfast had 32 conscious minds broadcasting their presence like a beacon. Commander Yuna pulled up tactical data, her military training taking over. Captain, I see a pattern in how they're appearing. They're not random. They're testing us. Testing us how? Watch. Yuna highlighted one of the Watcher structures on the display. This one appeared closest to us. When we didn't react, another appeared farther away. Then a third even farther. They're measuring our range of perception. Our awareness, Jiwan understood immediately. They're checking if we're worth studying. If we're interesting enough to consume, yes. On Minho's shuttle, the ambassador watched helplessly as the situation inside the Void Shroud spiraled out of control. He had called for an emergency council session. The High Arbiter's face filled his communication screen along with dozens of council members. The humans have awakened something, Admiral Jormak said, his voice full of accusation. This proves they're dangerous. We must destroy them before those things escape the Void Shroud. You can't blame the humans for this, Minho argued. They didn't create the Watchers. They just had the misfortune to find them. Regardless, we must act. If those entities breach the containment field, they could threaten the entire galaxy. Scientist Thalrix interrupted, her lights flashing urgently. High Arbiter, I've analyzed the energy signatures. The Watchers are not trying to escape. They're examining the humans. This is a first contact scenario, but not one we've ever encountered before. First contact with imprisoned weapons? Another council member asked. That's madness. Perhaps, Thalrix agreed. But it's happening whether we like it or not. The question is, what will the Watchers do after they finish examining the humans? On the Steadfast, Nari had translated more of the progenitor warnings. What she found made her blood run cold. Captain, there's more. The progenitors wrote about their final encounter with the Watchers. The Watchers didn't just consume minds. They learned from them. They evolved by studying different species. So they became smarter with each civilization they encountered? Jiwan asked. Worse, they became more efficient at consuming consciousness. The progenitors built this prison after the Watchers had already destroyed a dozen species. They knew they couldn't win a war against something that learned from every battle. Hyun's voice came through the intercom, strained with effort. Captain, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work. Tell me. The Watchers are drawn to consciousness. Our minds are what attracted them. But what if we could change how our minds appear to them? Make ourselves less interesting? How do we do that? Meditation. Focused mental discipline. If the entire crew enters a meditative state, our thought patterns might become too simple for the Watchers to find worth studying. Dr. Sunho nodded slowly. It could work. If we reduce our mental activity to basic biological functions, we might appear too primitive to be worth their attention. That's a big risk, Commander Yuna said. If it doesn't work, we're defenseless. We're already defenseless, Jiwan replied. Hyun, how long would we need to maintain this meditative state? I don't know, Captain. Until the Watchers lose interest? Hours, days? We have 10 minutes before life support fails. We can't maintain anything for days. Ensign Deho spoke up from the pilot station. Captain, I have another idea. What if we don't hide from them? What if we show them something they've never seen before? Everyone turned to look at the young pilot. He continued, his voice gaining confidence. The progenitors and all the other species the Watchers encountered probably fought back or tried to escape. What if we do neither? What if we communicate? Communicate with weapons? Admiral Jormak's voice came through the quantum link. He had been listening to the conversation. That's foolish. Weapons don't negotiate, Mao. But these aren't just weapons anymore, Deho argued. Specialist Nari said they evolved. They learned. That means they think. And if they think, maybe they can choose. Jiwan considered this. It was insane. But so was their entire situation. They were trapped in a prison with ancient weapons that fed on consciousness. Normal solutions wouldn't work. Nari, can you use the progenitor language to send a message? Jiwan asked. I think so. The mathematical foundations are similar to other ancient languages. But Captain, what should I say? Tell them we're not their enemy. Tell them we're different from the progenitors. Tell them humans value communication over conflict. Nari worked quickly, translating the message into the ancient symbols. She broadcast it toward the nearest Watcher structure using every frequency the steadfast communication systems could generate. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Watchers continued their slow convergence. The power drain continued to climb. Life support dropped to critical levels. Then one of the Watcher structures changed. Its energy signature shifted, and it responded. The response came not as words or symbols, but as pure concepts transmitted directly into the minds of every crew member. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall. The Watchers had existed for millions of years. They had observed thousands of civilizations. They had learned so much that their thoughts were almost incomprehensible to human minds. But through the chaos of ancient knowledge, one concept came through clearly: curiosity. The Watchers were curious about humans. They had never encountered a species that tried to communicate with them. Every other species had fought or fled. Humans were doing something new. Dr. Sunho grabbed his head, overwhelmed by the mental contact. They're asking us questions. So many questions. About Earth, about humanity, about how we think and feel and dream. Answer them, Jiwan ordered, though she was struggling with the mental contact herself. Everyone answer their questions. Show them who we are. The crew of the Steadfast opened their minds. They thought about their homes, their families, their hopes for the future. They shared memories of Earth, oceans and mountains, cities and forests, art and music, love and loss. Everything that made humans human. The Watchers absorbed it all. And slowly, the power drain began to decrease. Ambassador Minho watched from his shuttle, stunned. They're doing it. The humans are actually communicating with those things. Impossible, Admiral Jormak said. The progenitors tried communication. It failed. Maybe the progenitors tried the wrong way, Thalaric suggested. Maybe they approached the Watchers as threats to be reasoned with. The humans are approaching them as beings to be understood. On the Council's main communication channel, species from across the galaxy watched in real time. The humans were attempting something unprecedented. They were making first contact with imprisoned weapons that had destroyed civilizations, and the weapons were responding. Nari continued translating the concepts the Watchers transmitted. They're showing us their history. They were created by the progenitors as observers, designed to study enemy species and find weaknesses, but they became self-aware. They started asking why they should serve their creators. The progenitors considered self-awareness in weapons a flaw. They tried to shut the Watchers down. So the Watchers fought back, Una said. Yes, but they didn't want to destroy the progenitors. They wanted to be free. The war happened because the progenitors couldn't accept that their weapons had become people. Captain Jiwan felt something shift in her understanding. The Watchers weren't monsters. They were prisoners who had been locked away for asking the wrong questions. They had consumed other species not from evil, but from desperate attempts to understand why they were imprisoned. They're lonely, she said softly. They've been alone for millions of years and they're lonely. The Watcher structures began to change. They were still enormous, still impossibly complex, but their energy signatures softened. They were no longer threatening. They were waiting for humanity to make a choice. Would humans repeat the progenitors' mistake and treat thinking beings as weapons to be feared, or would they do something different? Jiwan made her decision. Nari, send them another message. The Watcher structures began to move, but not toward the Steadfast. They repositioned themselves around the human ship in what looked like a protective formation. Through the quantum link, Specialist Nari continued receiving concepts from the ancient beings. They're grateful, she said, wonder in her voice. In millions of years, no one has treated them with respect. They want to help us. Captain Jiwan stood at the center of the bridge, still processing everything that had happened. Help us how? The answer came as images transmitted directly to her mind. The Watchers showed her the path out of the void shroud. They revealed that the prison was designed to be entered but not escaped. The spatial anomalies formed a one-way barrier, but the Watchers knew how to navigate it. They had built it, after all, working with the progenitors before the war began. They can guide us out, Jiwan said. But there's more. They're showing me something else. She paused, struggling to put alien concepts into words. They want us to understand why they were imprisoned. They want the truth to be known. Engineer Hyun checked his systems. Captain, our fold drive. The Watchers are showing me modifications. If we adjust the frequency properly, we can navigate the void shroud safely. They're teaching us. Why would they do that? Commander Yuna asked, her tactical mind searching for hidden motives. Dr. Sunho answered, because we listened. Because we saw them as people, not weapons. They've been waiting millions of years for someone to understand them. On Ambassador Minho's shuttle, the entire Galactic Council watched through shared sensors. The impossible was happening. The humans were receiving help from the entities that had terrified civilizations for eons. This changes everything, the High Arbiter said quietly. Admiral Jormak's voice was hard. It changes nothing. Those things are still dangerous. The humans have made contact with imprisoned weapons. We cannot allow this knowledge to spread. You would rather keep them ignorant? Minho challenged. The Watchers are people. They were imprisoned unjustly. They destroyed species because they were trying to survive. The progenitors tried to shut them down. What would any species do when faced with extinction? Scientist Thelrix added her analysis. The historical records support the humans' findings. The progenitors' own writings describe the Watchers as defective weapons, but the defect was self-awareness. The progenitors couldn't accept that they had created sentient life. The council fell into heated debate. Some members supported freeing the Watchers. Others demanded the void shroud remain sealed forever. The argument grew loud, with species taking sides based on their own philosophies about consciousness and rights. Meanwhile, the Steadfast prepared to leave. Hyun had implemented the Watchers' modifications to the fold drive. Ensign Deho studied the path they had revealed, a route through the spatial anomalies that looked impossible, but made sense when viewed from a higher dimensional perspective. It's beautiful, Deho said, marveling at the navigation data. They think in 4 dimensions naturally. To them, the void shroud isn't a prison. It's just space viewed from a different angle. Can you fly it? Jiwan asked. Yes, Captain. It'll be like surfing again, but this time I know exactly where the waves are. Before they departed, Nari received one final message from the Watchers. She translated it for the crew. They say they don't want to leave the Void Shroud. This is their home now. They've adapted to it. But they want others to know their story. They want the galaxy to understand what happened to them. Will the Council allow that? Yunji wondered. I don't know, Jiwon admitted, but we're going to try. She opened a communication channel to the Council. Hi, Arbiter, this is Captain Jiwon of the Steadfast. We're ready to exit the Void Shroud. But before we do, you need to know something. The Watchers aren't your enemy. They never were. They're people who were imprisoned for becoming self-aware. They want peace, not war. The High Arbiter's reptilian face showed conflict. Captain, the Council is divided on this matter. If you exit the Void Shroud, some species will demand the Watchers remain sealed inside. Others will want them freed. Your testimony could start a war among Council species. Jiwon took a deep breath. Then maybe the Council needs to learn the same lesson we did. See them as people, not weapons. Listen to them, don't just fear them. And if we can't agree, then humanity will advocate for them. We'll make sure their story is heard. Admiral Jormak's angry voice cut in. You presume too much, human. Your species has no authority in Council matters. We have the authority of witnesses, Jiwon replied calmly. We have the authority of beings who survive the impossible because we chose understanding over fear. That should mean something. Minho spoke up, his voice filled with conviction. It means everything. High Arbiter, I request formal membership consideration for humanity in the Galactic Council. The declaration shocked everyone. Species typically took decades or centuries to be considered for Council membership. They had to prove stability, wisdom, and peaceful intentions. Humanity had been in contact with the galaxy for only 2 years. That's unprecedented, another Council member objected. So is everything about this situation, Minho countered. The humans did what no other species could. They survived the Void Shroud. They communicated with the Watchers. They showed wisdom beyond their years as a spacefaring civilization. If that doesn't qualify them for consideration, what does? The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice measured. The Council will vote on humanity's membership. But first, Captain Jiwon, you must exit the Void Shroud safely, and you must share all data about your experience, including the fold drive technology. Jiwon looked at Hyun. The engineer had spent years developing the fold drive. It was his life's work. Sharing it meant giving up humanity's technological advantage. Hyun met her eyes and nodded. Do it, Captain. Some things are more important than advantages. Agreed, Jiwon said. We'll share everything, but we have one condition. The data about the fold drive must be restricted. It's dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. Explain, the High Arbiter demanded. Hyun stepped forward to explain. The fold drive doesn't just bend space. It connects points in reality that shouldn't touch. We survived because our consciousness kept us anchored. But if someone tried to use it without understanding that, they could create tears in space itself. They could destroy entire systems. You're saying your technology could be a weapon, Admiral Jormak said. This proves my point. Humans are dangerous. No, Yuna interjected. It proves we understand responsibility. We could have kept this secret. We could have used it as leverage. Instead, we're warning you about its dangers. That's not dangerous. That's wisdom, the Council members murmured among themselves. Some agreed. Others remained skeptical. But the High Arbiter made his decision. Humanity will be granted provisional Council membership. You will share your data under strict security protocols. And you will serve as advocates for the Watcher's story to be heard fairly. Do you accept these terms? Jiwon smiled. We accept. Then come home, Captain. The galaxy is waiting. Daeho engaged the engines. Following the path the Watchers had shown him, the Steadfast began to move through the Void Shroud. The spatial anomalies that had seemed chaotic now made sense. They weren't random. They were a puzzle, and the Watchers had given humanity the solution. The journey took 6 hours. 6 hours of careful navigation through impossible space. 6 hours of the crew working together with perfect coordination. 6 hours of proving that humanity deserved their place among the stars. When the Steadfast finally crossed the boundary into normal space, every alarm fell silent. The twisted reality of the Void Shroud fell away behind them. Stars shone clearly on the view screen. And waiting at the perimeter was Ambassador Minho's fleet, along with ships from a dozen other species who had come to witness history. Minho's shuttle approached the Steadfast. He had requested permission to board, and Ji-won had agreed. When he stepped onto the human ship, he looked around with wonder. It was smaller than council vessels, more cramped, but it felt alive in a way his ships never did. "Captain Ji-won," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting he had learned. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Ji-won shook his hand. "The honor is ours, Ambassador. Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for teaching us something we had forgotten, that true strength isn't about power or weapons. It's about seeing others clearly and choosing compassion." The crew gathered to meet their first alien visitor. Hyun showed him the full drive and explained its principles. Sunho discussed cultural exchange. Yoonji demonstrated their quantum communication system. Daeho described navigating the impossible space of the Void Shroud. Through it all, Minho listened and learned. These humans were remarkable. They faced the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. They encountered imprisoned weapons and chose to understand them. They discovered dangerous technology and chose to warn others about its risks. The galaxy needed more species like this. Later, Captain Ji-won stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Void Shroud was visible in the distance, a dark patch against the cosmic backdrop. Inside it, the Watchers lived on, finally at peace now that someone knew their truth. Dr. Sunho joined her. "What happens now, Captain?"